Hello, this is Real World Audio. So let's decode the matrix of audio, and I give you a few pointers on how audio works and what are the approaches and how they came to be. So today we are tackling the purist approach. So what is this thing? So the purist approach is to keep the signal path as simple as possible. So we are adding as little complexity and as few number of components as we can get by. And the reason behind that is that if you have fewer components, then you minimize the loss of information, because each step you put in audio in the chain from source to end, with each step there is a loss that you introduce. So if you keep the path simple, as low number of transformations applied to the signal as possible, then you can retain the maximum amount of information readout from your recording. And this is very easy. It's supported by the laws of physics, and no one can argue with that. It's very simple, and it's if you want an example for that, it's like a musical chair. When one person whispers a message into the ear of the next person, and that next person whispers to the third, and so on and so on. If you have only 3 people in the path, then the third person, what the person is saying, that message will be pretty close to what the original message was. But if the message goes through 100 people, then it will be grossly distorted. This is the same thing that happens with your music signal. However, this was the good thing. Now comes the bad thing. The difficulty is that the fewer the steps, so the fewer people that the information goes through, then transferring the extremes in that audio information content is much harder. So if we want extreme frequency response, which means that we want like to go below 20 hertz and above 20 kilohertz, and we want to have very high sound pressure levels as well, then doing this with minimal signal path becomes extremely and exceedingly difficult. However, this was the approach that was used at the birth of audio, and Western electric gear are a testament to this approach of using the fewest paths in the signal, the fewest stages, and there they used acoustics as a means for amplification. So they took acoustical considerations into the extreme, and today we are not using this approach anymore, because taking acoustics into consideration and using it as an important or key or central tool to keep the path simple had huge problems. And the problems with that is that, number one, every single component needs to be the highest quality in this signal path, because you put in one single substandard piece, it already shows in the end result as coloration, as distortion. So it means that your purist gear is becoming expensive, because every single part has to be of very high quality, and it has to be bespoke, which means it has to be basically unique and built to the situation, built to match your room, and that is very expensive in 2 ways: either expensive in cost or expensive in time and effort requirement. So how does that work? How can we keep the signal path short? It requires three components. First component, you need as efficient loudspeakers as possible. For best results, you need 105 dB per watt meter efficiency or higher. This is, I would say, when you reach the highest peaks of audio with that efficiency. As a consequence, number two, 1 or 2 watts will be enough for you to for the needs of your music reproduction. And as a consequence of this, you need very few gain stages because you need only 2 watts. It means you have to amplify the signal only to a 2 watt level versus amplifying your signal to a 5000 watt level, which requires 250, or I would say 2500 times greater magnification with 2500 times greater detail loss and chance of introducing new errors into the signal. And I cannot understate it enough, the importance of that fact that if you do not need to over amplify your signal, then your losses stay very minimal. How you can imagine this process? Imagine that the signal that you start with, it's like a digital image, a digital photograph. And let's say you have a 5 megapixel photograph. And if you want to amplify it to a 2 watt power level, it is like you have to upsample this into a, let's say, a 20 megapixel picture. So it means that each picture has to be blown, each pixel has to be blown up to 4 pixels. And then you will see a little pixelation. And because your loudspeakers are not as efficient, not 100% efficient, but less. So let's treat 105 dB as already we are blurring the picture a little bit. So you add a blur filter to your enlarged image. So now you have something which is similar to your original image as it should have been if it didn't need to go through all of these things, but it's a little bit more pixelated and a little blurry. If you have to blow it up to a 5000 watt level, and then you have an 83 dB efficient loudspeaker, it means that you are blowing it up to a, let's say, a gigapixel image where all you see is just monstrous pixelation, and then you add a tremendous blur filter on it. So you will see those gigantic arrays of clusters of almost the same pixels, and they are just blurred beyond recognition. And that's why people do not realize that when they are using low efficiency speakers with very high power amps, that something is happening there, because the low efficiency of the loudspeakers is blurring those losses and those problems that tremendous amplification introduces to the signal. And as a result, you will have something which sounds just like perfect, but upon a little bit more listening, you will realize that it is a very mechanized sound, and it perhaps sounds very much like a studio recording, but it doesn't sound like a real person singing or a real piano playing, but it sounds like an artificial piano, or maybe a metal violin, or a violin with metal strings or something like that. And that's why, because of those factors. So let's see, do I have, yes, I have one more slide, is to have this purist approach. Uh, Another thing that you need is that not just the amplifier that has only a very little power, so it doesn't need to stretch your music signal like an elastic band to almost ripping, but keep it at a level where it still has enough elasticity and plasticity. You also need a preamplifier, a preamplification that is not a full preamp, so you are not adding a needless gain stage, needless buffer stage. Just keep it as simple as possible. I would recommend using a transformer for volume control, because that is just a piece of wire and it's going to have less impact on the sound, less coloration, and it will take away less details than the most expensive active preamplifier that's available on the market. So this is one example of a purist approach system, and you can see this is a horn loudspeaker with very high efficiency. Here it was posted at Lanco Heaven, and you see that's a person. He is this tall, and then the speakers are much taller than him. So you see, this is one price that you have to pay for an ultimate purist approach. Extreme room requirement and extreme expense. If you want to have like an original Western Electric system, it will set you back more money than the most expensive sports cars you can buy. And however, that's no reason for anyone to give up, because you yourself can design and build similar devices at reasonable cost. It's just I put this here as an example to show you why the purist approach is not a mainstream approach, because commercially it's completely useless and dead for commercial application, because you cannot get it at Walmart or Best Buy, something that's so huge and it's impossible to transport. Just the transportation cost of it is way beyond what a normal sane human being would spend on his or her entire stereo budget. And here I have something that most audiophiles would allow themselves to have, but even this is super extreme. So even these Altec Voice of the Theater A5s are big enough that you can smuggle several people inside them if you want to. I hope no one uses them for that purpose. But they seem deceptively small in this picture, but here the height of the room is just gigantic. You can, if you can put several people in front of either of these units, and if someone has these at home, then everyone who enters will say, oh my god, this is freaking enormous. And yes, that's true. But this is something that can be a cornerstone of a purist approach system, and will help you on your journey what such an approach can bring to your life. And it might not be the ultimate response what you need in your life, and certainly probably Nelly would have killed me if I bring such speakers home. So that's why I just designed my own and I built my speakers. And these are still not baby speakers. They are, how big are they? They are about 240 liters free air volume. So the total volume of them that they displace from the air with the cabinet is around 300 liters each. So that's the cabinet size, plus there's the compression driver on the top, that's extra. So they are not small by any means, but I have to tell you that they really don't feel like they are too big. When I built them, they seemed quite big, but now it's been over a year that I have them, and they seem to have shrunk. So this is something that will happen to you, that you will get, if you think they are too big, you will eventually get used to them. And part of the process why I get used to them is because when you enter this range of sound reproduction, you go over 100 dB efficiency, and then your universe will change, what you think about sound. And here, these guys, they do 105 dB efficiency, but that 105 dB efficiency extends only down to 50 Hertz. For me, my babies, they are only about 102 dB efficient, so 3 dB less, but that efficiency extends to below 20 Hertz. And for me, this is what has been a life-changing experience, to experience bass, deep bass and subsonic bass, which is efficient. And I can tell you, it's like nothing. You can hear, if you have a subwoofer, the bass, even though a subwoofer can reproduce 20 Hertz, or maybe some of the best subs can go below 20 Hertz, but it's nothing like what an efficient sub can do. What an efficient sub can do is like what you feel at a real venue, like a real movie theater, not like someone's home stereo movie theater, but the real deal. Or when you go to a club where they play extremely loud music with really heavy bass material, but there the bass has a very different sound, very different nature to it compared to what you hear in a small tiny room reproduced by a tiny subwoofer. So here we go. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this little approach to Purist audio is helpful on your audio journey, and increases your understanding and perception of the progress of audio, and why we do not see this approach. Because just one word is that if you want a full range approach of this high efficiency, then you really have to think outside the box. This took me 20 years to come up with this design, and I'm using concepts which no one uses. It's truly something unique, and anyway, that will be for other days, other videos. But what I'm saying, that if you want to go for a purist approach with something simple, something small, you can go for that, but that will give you only part of the response. So those baby speakers, those are single driver Alnico speakers, and they will give you a smaller version of that purist experience. So thank you, bye bye.